And we stand today on the edge of a new frontier.
As my father accepted the Democratic nomination for president, he looked to the future and challenged Americans to join him on a journey toward a new frontier.
That spirit is kept alive today by a new generation of leaders. The New Frontier Award celebrates men and women from the public and private sector who are answering my grandfather's call to service.
The new frontier of which I speak.
The new frontier of which I speak is not a set of promises.
It's not a set of promises. It is a set of challenges.
It is a set of challenges.
It sums up not what I intend to offer the American people,
but what I intend to ask of them.
It holds out the promise of more sacrifice
instead of more security.
The new frontier is here,
whether we seek it or not.
Beyond that frontier are uncharted areas of science and space.
Unsolved problems of peace
and war, unconquered problems of ignorance and prejudice.
Unanswered questions of poverty and surplus.
I believe that the times require imagination
and courage and perseverance.
I'm asking each one of you to be pioneers toward that new frontier.
For courage, not complacency,
is our need today.
Leadership, not salesmanship.
And the only valid test of leadership
is the ability to lead
and lead vigorously.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. I'm Rachel Floor, Executive Director of the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation. Today's New Frontier Summit was conceived over a year ago to continue the Go for Something Bolder spirit, celebrating the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, and to bring a new generation of leaders to the JFK Library for today's moonshot challenges. COVID-19 motivated our New Frontier Network Steering Committee to help leaders rise in these challenging times through new virtual programming, including the New Frontier Friday series, the New Frontier Forum, and today's summit. Before we begin, I would like to thank the New Frontier Network's corporate sponsors, John Hancock, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts, and Boston Capital. Today's summit and All We Can Save book sponsor, Beal and Thomas, and New Frontier Circle members who support the Foundation's strategic goals to activate new generations. Now we will hear from a dozen New Frontier leaders who committed to a monthly journey from June to September, exploring President Kennedy's legacy and applying lessons to the challenges we face today. Keynotes from Mick Ebeling, founder of Not Impossible Labs, and Hank Rogers, founder of the International Moonbase Alliance, a climate conversation with Kim Kubinas, Global Ambassador for B-Lab, and All We Can Save co-editors, Ayana Elizabeth Johnson, founder of Urban Ocean Lab, and Catherine Wilkinson, Editor-in-Chief of the Drawdown Review. Like the New Frontier Award winners in the video, we know President Kennedy's vision requires all of us to answer the question of today's summit. How will we advance courage and commitment for today's challenges? I would now like to welcome Chris Casey from the New Frontier Network Steering Committee. Thank you so much, Chris.
Frontier Network Steering Committee. Pleased to welcome everyone this afternoon. We've got an amazing program. I'm Chris Casey. In addition to being on the New Frontier Steering Committee, I'm also a dad, a soccer coach, and a partner at an investment firm here in Boston. A little bit about my story, my connection to the library. I did my senior thesis in college on President Kennedy, especially his early career, and researched in the stacks at the library building in Boston. Became somewhat disconnected from the library for about 2 decades, and then a company I was working with decided to host an event at the library, and just kind of it brought back all those memories of being there, studying, and kind of interacting with the firsthand documents from President Kennedy's legacy, and just spurred me to get back involved. There was a speech that night from one of the members of the library just talking about commitment and giving back and civic duty. I followed up after that with Maggie and James, who I'm sure most of you know, and we started to get involved, and shortly thereafter we started a series of dinners and lunches in the Seaport District in Boston, and out of that sprang this idea of getting people together, talking more often. And then when COVID hit this year, we decided there was even more need for connectivity, connection, people to kind of share their thoughts and experiences. And I think the program this year with New Frontier Fridays, the New Frontier Forum, and then today's New Frontier Summit are just a wonderful outgrowth of all of that effort. So thank you so much. Remember that you can always find this content on the New Frontier Forum page and our YouTube videos. The summit is really seeking to bring in people to inspire, engage in both their communities as well as with their families and at work. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to three amazing folks, and you'll hear from them now and lots of other people in the future. But it's now time to hear from Derek Ham, Lindsay Jesperson, and Paul Schaefer. Thank you very much.
I'm Derek Ham, an associate professor of art and design at North Carolina State University. In the last several months have been rewarding for me. As a member of the forum, I've built relationships with a diverse group of leaders and engaged with them on a range of topics that are both timely and relevant to the world we're living in. You know, many of the conversations we've had have resonated with my own personal work, in which I use virtual reality as a technological approach to help us revisit the stories of our past. And in general, I believe revisiting the past is a critical exercise, one that allows us to be honest, reflective, and helps us build empathy, but only if we truly decide to look at the world and listen to others. And it's fascinating to see how we've quickly appropriated the technology of today to help bridge the gaps of our geographic location. You know, I know we're all starting to get a little bit zoomed out, but technology is still a powerful tool to help us connect with people, not just in space, but also through time. And I think that this will only increase with new tools of the future, VR, AR, but at the end, they're still just tools. Beneath the technology, we can't forget how important it is to connect to the things that make us human. You know, so often we're flooded with all the things that make us different. But it's important, and it's important for me to remind myself that it's the things that connects us, that keeps us together, and that we're all in the struggle together. And it's only together that we're going to find these new solutions, new perspectives, and collectively work together to bring some of the long-lasting changes that I know we're all passionately seeking to bring in our communities.
Hi, I'm Paul Schaefer. These days, I work in the investment and finance industry, but I've had a career in government and politics, which I really owe to JFK. I so vividly remember at the age of 10, watching his inauguration. It was a snow day, so I was home, and deciding I was going to go into public service. Ask what you can do for your country resonates with me and should really resonate with all of us to this day. I got involved in the forum because I was really worried, and I was fearing that we were losing the notion of public service and the public good, the idea of out of many, one. The attack on our government and the attack on what people call the deep state is really an attack on the institutions that have kept us safe and allowed America to thrive and prosper. You know, that we were set on that path by the New Frontier, set us on a path to do great things. Go to the moon, fight racism, defeat communism, and create a society which really had a superb innovation engine. We need to remember what the New Frontier is all about and the challenges that pose to us. And we really need to rekindle and pick up those challenges. Not from a point of nostalgia, but as a point of continuing the good work that will make America thrive and prosper and be inclusive for everyone. The library and the New Frontier events have really helped me rethink and get in touch with those ideas and think about what are the important elements for us going forward. Thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay Jesperson. For me, there was really three themes that stood out from the summit to me. One was a really true sense of belonging to this exceptional community. There was an energy that brought us together in our shared interests and our shared values, but we really connected over very different, very rich experiences. And the forum created a space for us to share those experiences, to hear from other new voices, to learn from them, really beyond our daily circles and sectors. And I thought what was also really helpful was the format, in that this model of learning, discussing, applying, and taking the time to convene and really think and reflect upon these in a different way built us as a stronger group, both as individuals on our own individual leadership journeys, as well as a very special group of like-minded thinkers. And the other two themes, I think, were things we probably all knew a little bit before, but the forum really underpinned and reinforced them differently. The second theme was really around vision and JFK's perspective that this wasn't just, and we shouldn't just be American focused, but really come to problems and come with solutions as global world citizens. I think the forum reinforced that this importance of a collective purpose informed both his and informed our perspectives now. We talked a lot about how historical perspectives, keeps a much wider vision, in that, like, the further back you go, the further into the future you can see, and how this thinking really, and very certainly provides a much longer and wider viewpoint for all of us. And the third theme really was that JFK's legacy for me provided a framework to solve these problems. The fact that we might not all, and we probably don't have all the answers for everything that we're gonna come across, but it's the framework to solve those problems. And that, to me, really is such a great equalizer. This idea of inclusive leadership, that the New Frontier way of thinking means that any person, any group, any generation, any background can enter and share and have the same aspirations. And when we know thyself, we can know what we're uniquely positioned to offer. And it's this opportunity to bring people along, because we've already been trained in this thinking, allows us an opportunity to practice, to look for opportunities and to take them and to do better. And I think this reinforced the importance of the fact that if we practice this intent, we can find new ways to serve, we can be impactful, and we can lift up a broader range of everybody, for much more real, much more lasting systemic changes.
Thank you, James. A year ago, many of us gathered at the JFK Library for the JFK Space Summit. And that particular forum was around the notion of going for something bolder. As a member of the JFK Library Foundation's Board of Advisors and as co-chair of Move the Needle, we've been going for something bolder in Boston over the past year on many fronts. One such initiative has been advancing systemic strategies for attracting talent and also for building opportunity for people of color in Boston, in conjunction with the JFK Library and many other businesses across the Commonwealth. The new frontier is here, and President Kennedy's aspirational moonshot rhetoric strikes us even more importantly today. This theme of going for something bolder, of shooting for the moon, these themes are current today when we think of innovation, when we think of courage, perseverance, ending the violence of systemic racism in its many forms. We're capturing the essence of what Kennedy had in mind. Systemic reckoning has been building for many, many decades before COVID, before our current Black Lives Matter movement. But right now, it has everything to do with prioritizing the challenges that we face and meeting those challenges head on. This is what President Kennedy called for when he focused on equal pay, civil rights, nuclear disarmament, the Peace Corps serving throughout the world, and the NASA astronauts winning race to the moon. Today we know that we have to meet that challenge, but we need to do it in a way that works with many sectors coming together. It's really a cross-sector, intergenerational convening power that we're focused on here at the JFK Library Foundation. And I hope that what you take away from today's forum is that you imagine today, where we are here now, that you keep moving for a better future and that you draw upon the essence of Kennedy's message, and that we're able to develop a new frontier of justice, innovation, and renewed commitment. The challenges that we face now are really opportunities for leadership and for us all to convene around the concrete goals that we form here today. So with that, I will leave you to the rest of the program, and I hope that we all walk away from today's program with a renewed sense of purpose, of mission, and that we're all shooting for the moon. Thank you, James.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. While collaborative leadership is at the core of democracy, the New Frontier speech made it clear that in order to align policy, capital, and culture, at the same time produce results, a very determined and proactive attitude is crucial. At the same time, the need to create a well-structured environment for people to be able to work together becomes obvious, bringing people together, making them go down the path from me to we to now. The ability to attract as many stakeholders as possible to the table relies on having a constructive learning environment. The combination of outreach and gathering as much feedback as possible is an unavoidable permanent task, and it has to be done in as many different languages as necessary. In looking at today's challenges, we see more and more people coming to the realization that waiting for the betterment of social conditions to happen naturally is not an option anymore, and it becomes clear that a new form of engagement is needed. It can all be summarized through the concept of positive social impact, currently being addressed by a series of movements such as conscious capitalism, the B Corp, and so on. Establishing a high bar is a key part of the transition into creating and fostering actionable initiatives, which come with the imposed risks of this learn-as-you-go moment. The time to act is now. I've joined the effort to promote the acceleration of the impact economy through recruiting individuals and corporations and inspiring them to move from a neutral to a proactive direct impact attitude in a call to action that completely aligns with the New Frontier initiative. These include pursuing efficient supply chains, understanding customer loyalty, and integrating a no harm to anyone mentality. Key elements of this movement include paying equal attention to individuals as well as social and community groups. Responsible environmental policies and governance of all sustainable economic matrices already in place need to become the norm to a theme-driven workplace that values and encourages new and diverse ideas and opinions. Throughout the world, recent events have brought much attention and focus to the need to engage. We are people on a mission, and we are glad to have more of this on this journey. Thank you very much.
So the way in which I've approached this is through reflection, specifically on for courage, not complacency is our need today. Leadership and not salesmanship. So this is my personal reflection on what trust has meant to me and where it's led me in my vocational journey. Firstly, in retrospect, I've always been in search of leverage. Those actions with disproportional outcomes for better futures. That's how I articulate my journey to date. Over the last year, that led me to having some extraordinary conversations with some confidential conversations with some wonderful people. And I asked them one question, and that is, what is the deepest leverage point that you can think of to shape better futures? And their answers unanimously led me to one conclusion. The deepest leverage point that they could think of is trust. Anecdotally, we know that we have a deep crisis with trust in the world, but it's that catalytic moment sent me on a journey to move through anecdote to the science of trust. And I wanted to know what trust is, why it's important, and how it can be built, if not scaled. To the first question, what is trust? Both the literature and common sense are clear about what it means to trust. Firstly, a definition. Trust is a willingness to accept vulnerability or risk based on expectations regarding another's behavior. And what are the ingredients of trust? There are three tenets that really shout out of the literature and the data, and that is benevolence, integrity, and capability are absolutely central to trust. The degree to which those three elements are in the room is the degree one can be trusted. So why is trust important? There are very compelling correlations between trust and better outcomes. In fact, there's a causal relationship between trust and better outcomes at every level and across all dimensions. In other words, there's a correlation that data shows us between trust and human flourishing, trust and better economic outcomes. You can in fact map the GDP of nations against social trustworthiness levels. And of course, there's a correlation between trust and better planetary stewardship. So then this in turn led me to the question, how can trust be scaled? So firstly, with these insights, I created Trust 17, which aims to help others as a watermark in the background to scale trust for better outcomes at interpersonal, organizational, and country level. The vision of Trust 17 is to inspire 10 million action-oriented conversations, to touch 1 billion lives, and to engage and shape $1 trillion by 2030. And of course, that is in step with the 2030 agenda. Another example of how I've tried to scale trust is serve with the JFK Foundation, which has been a wonderful privilege. And another example of scaling trust is a partnership with the X Prize Foundation based in Los Angeles. We are creating a $30 million prize for teams around the world to scale trust at city level and then demonstrate a correlation between increased trustworthiness levels and actions towards the SDGs. To date, we've got 17 UN agencies on board, and we're building an extraordinary team of private partners. So that's the story of how trust has played a deeply transformative role in my life and leadership journey to shape futures, better futures at scale. And going back to the opening quote on which I reflected, for courage, not complacency, is our need today. Leadership and not salesmanship. On reflection, what I've just shared with you is how I've tried to show courage. It's how I've tried not to be complacent, and it's how I've tried to demonstrate leadership, not through peddling ideas or products and services, so to speak, but making evident, self-evident, the need for and promise of trust to scale better futures. Thank you very much.
So we move forward as we look at commitment for these sustained solutions. In times of crisis, leaders build bridges, not walls. What we're looking to do is to uplift and support economic mobility. Here in Charlotte, Charlotte was ranked as being the least likely city for economic and social mobility, which sparked a commitment from every stakeholder here in Charlotte to commit to social and economic mobility. How can we as a city, as a region, support this sense of economic and social mobility to move folks out of poverty? What if we commit ourselves and everyone to an action, to an item? What do we do? And this created a lot of responses from the community, including Johnson C. Smith University, a historically Black college located in Charlotte. More than 150 years has it been an engine for economic mobility. But the next wave, the new frontier, requires new ideas. This gave birth to the new science building, state of the art, in our Smith Tech Innovation Center, which was pouring out to support inclusive tech-based economic development for our community, to ensure that as the city and the region grows in prosperity, those located in it will have the resources, the opportunities to participate and to contribute. Now, as we move into this next phase of what can we all do? What is it that's driving us to commit to something that's going to change the systems of these injustices that many people are facing? The opportunity. So ask yourselves, what are you willing to commit to? What are you willing to dig down deep into supporting the things that you care the most about? Thank you.
How is everyone? My name is Jordan Wilson. I'm happy to be a member of the New Frontiers Committee, and I'm also happy to speak to you today as a voter. I'm an advocate for civic reimagination, and I seek to empower voices of marginalized and traditionally disconnected voters through research and technology. In 2016, I co-founded Politicking. It's a political information platform that engages traditionally marginalized voters with mainstream, nonpartisan information. While I was raised in politics and public service, I worked at the Harvard Institute of Politics and also have much experience in civic research. After seeing so many people unsatisfied with the product of the 2016 election, I wondered, had they realized how disengaged they were? So I started Politicking. We'd integrate information, technology, and make it easily accessible. On to moving and joining the New Frontiers Network. This network has enhanced my perspective about the need for change within our civic systems. Imagine if we understood who and what issues were really at stake when we participated in elections. This means understanding that much more that what's happening at 1600 Pennsylvania is at stake. You know, what happens at City Hall or at the county building actually impacts our day-to-day lives. The network has really introduced me to opportunities for innovation. I've had a chance to speak with people in finance. I've had a chance to speak with public officials or folks who love data like me. We all get together and collaborate to ensure that their innovative ideas that promote equity for all through civic engagement. The New Frontiers Network has also introduced me to a wealth of knowledge about the legacy of civic engagement from the dynamic breakthroughs of JFK. Innovations in civic engagement do not start, of course, with what happened with the civil rights and voting rights movements of the 1960s. We should all think more about how we can embrace innovation in civic engagement. And I think we can do this first by reimagining our civic systems. Let's utilize technology and modern resources to pursue accountability from our leaders. I encourage you all to listen today, as I'm sure you already have, and really think about what you can do. You know, it's always interesting to think about what we can invent or what we can come up with, but let's be resourceful and continue to embrace each other and ideas, again, that will work for all.
Hello, I'm Matthew Cornelius, the Executive Director of the Alliance for Digital Innovation. We are a group of committed technology and cybersecurity companies who believe it's in the best interest of the American government to have access to the greatest and most innovative capabilities to solve mission outcomes and deliver better services to citizens. I'm very proud to be a part of the New Frontier Forum and to share all of these wonderful experiences, including those we are hearing about today, with so many like-minded, terrific individuals. One definition of frontier is the limit of knowledge of the most advanced achievement in a field. America is its own frontier, and we are constantly imagining what it can and should be. This group, this experience made possible by the JFK Library, enables us all to use lessons of the past and perspectives of the present to think about the future that can be achieved through greater sharing, listening, collaboration, innovation, and most importantly, patriotism. We are all here because of our love for this country and our reverence for one of its greatest leaders, President Kennedy, and our zeal over a half century after his passing to continue this American experiment, dream of futures that might seem unimaginable today, and to build the communities, relationships, and opportunities for us all to achieve a brighter future together. And with that, now we will have our summit keynotes.
Hello, everyone. I'm Nick Ebeling from Not Impossible Labs. Thank you so much for inviting me to address you today at the summit. I'm incredibly honored, so thank you. Not Impossible and the work that I do is really this extension of this infatuation, this obsession that I have at looking at things that are impossible and trying to make them not impossible. And this is a result of now 10 years plus of different explorations, different kind of deep dives into tackling things that we call absurdities. Things that we see and we say, that's absurd, that's not right, that shouldn't be that way. And then we dogpile on it with brilliant people. We convene brilliant hackers and makers and programmers and engineers from all over the world to tackle these absurdities and try and create solutions, accessible solutions for people, things that are low cost, things that are easy to make, either DIY themselves or easy to find someplace. And it started, our first foray into this happened, like most great things in the world, on accident, when my wife and I discovered a paralyzed graffiti artist in Los Angeles who had ALS and was unable to talk, unable to communicate, and even more importantly, was unable to express himself in the passion, his art, his what he was so committed to. He was unable to do his art. And so a team of programmers and engineers and what we call misfit geniuses and mad scientists descended upon our house. My wife and kids and I moved out, tables and chairs pushed against the wall, people sleeping on floors, people sleeping on couches. And in the end, we ended up creating, at the time, what was the world's most low-cost DIY ocular recognition device that allowed him, this artist, to draw again using only his eyes. And that was this kind of aha moment of like, wait a second, how did we do that? What just happened? And that intensified this study, this passion around this concept of impossible. And years after that, our next foray into that space was around trying to create a low-cost, accessible prosthetic for a young boy who had both of his arms blown off in the war. And we said, how can we make it so this 12-year-old boy who's unable to take care of himself, unable to feed himself, how can we make it so he could have some form of independence again? So rinse and repeat, brilliant scientists and mad scientists and geniuses and hackers and makers and programmers descend upon the house. Wife and kids and I move out. Tables and chairs, sleeping on floors, the same thing. And in the end, we created the world's first 3D printing prosthetic lab. A way for the refugee camp where we deployed this in, a way for them to continue to deploy these solutions long after we left. We have a myriad of other things that we're tackling right now. Everything from solutions to abate and address symptoms of Parkinson's, to create tools for people who are deaf or hard of hearing to be able to experience music through their skin as the eardrum as opposed to through their eardrum. We're addressing things in Alzheimer's and dementia, hunger, a whole wide swath of different things. But the one commonality that I would say in all the things that we're tackling is that we have no idea how we're supposed to pull these off when we start. We are almost overwhelmed with this fear of the fact that we're not the ones to be able to pull this off. This self-consciousness of wait a second, we don't have the degrees, the diplomas, or the credentials to be able to do this. But what moves us past that insecurity, moves us past that feeling of self-doubt, is the fact that this is an absurdity that must be solved. This is something that is a hard thing to do. And so we commit to things that are hard because all great
and honorable actions are accompanied with great difficulties, and both must be enterprised and overcome with answerable courage.
The way we have translated that brilliant JFK quote is in a mantra that literally is emblazoned on our walls. It's in our signatures, and that is commit and then figure it out. Because we feel that when we're staring at these impossibilities, somebody has to try. Somebody has to do something to try to move the dial, to try to advance the ball in some capacity so that that absurdity can be addressed. One of our calls to action is, if not now, when? And if not me, who? And we live in a world now that is almost overwhelmed with challenges. These are unheralded times that we're living in right now. But one of the things that I have learned in the studying of impossible is the fact that we all need to just take a step back, because what is difficult for us now, what is the most difficult thing, the most greatest challenge, the biggest obstacle, the most daunting task for us right now is just that. It's for us. It's the most daunting thing for us. Think about past generations. Think about what our ancestors have gone through. Plagues, famine, genocide. Think of the things that they have encountered and been able to push through. Do we dare say that what we're experiencing right now is greater than what they've experienced? The answer is no. The answer is no, we shouldn't compare, because it is completely relevant to our experience, not to their experience. But if we learn anything from history, what we should learn is that in the studying of all things that are possible today, the main thing to pull out of that is that anything that's possible today, anything that you can touch or taste or smell or feel, anything that is possible today was impossible at one point. So the inverse of that is a prediction of our future. Anything that is impossible today, if we base it on stats, if we base it on history, if we base it on data, anything that is impossible today is on the trajectory of moving and transitioning from impossible to possible. So who are we to be so narcissistic to think that our challenges will be that one thing that in the history of our species, in the history of mankind, shall always and forever remain impossible? It won't. Part of how we tackle the things that we tackle is through a mantra: commit and then figure out how you're going to do it. Commit and then figure it out. The brilliant quote by President Kennedy: "We commit publicly and in full view of the world, and without any understanding of how we might accomplish what we have set out to do." Because once you have jumped, you can't scramble back up on the cliff. And so the challenges that we are facing right now, the things that we encounter in our lives, the things that we are presented every single day, it requires courage. It requires people to grasp the idea that fear and failure can only be surmounted, can only be dealt with by having tenacity and courage. And that courage is something that can't be taught. It must be exemplified. People like yourself can stare and look at the problems of the world and say, that's not right. Something needs to be done about that. We cannot sit back and just wait for systems and bureaucracies and governments and institutions to deal with the problems that are presented to us and before us. We as a species, we as a people must say, we have to do something about that. We have to start on that journey of transitioning things from impossible to possible. And maybe it doesn't happen in our lifetime. Maybe we begin the journey, but our path on that journey is cut short. But to show our children and future generations that the effort towards the accomplishment and the solving of things that are critical on this planet, that those are the worthwhile efforts. Those are the things that we must tackle That is how we guarantee the progress and the success of future generations. So, as you go forth, as you move on into the rest of this year, the rest of the decade, the rest of your life, the thing that I would ask you is to believe that you are the ones who can solve these problems. Believe that there is not someone special out there that you're waiting for, that you are the ones to do this. Because as JFK said, these times demand
imagination and courage and perseverance.
And the journey that you've all embarked upon, continue to be pioneers of that new frontier. Continue on that pursuit of progress. Continue on that pursuit of advancement of our species for the sake of this planet. Thank you again for inviting me. It is truly, truly an honor to be able to address you at the summit. Go forth and live a not impossible life and do everything you can to transition things from impossible to not impossible.
Hello, my name is Jordan Richardson, and I'm the Talent and Business Development Director at Not Impossible Labs and member of the JFK Library New Frontier Forum. As Mick just reminded us, we are all charged with committing to solve absurdities on this planet, assembling the necessary members of a superhero Avengers team, and leveraging technology for the sake of humanity to better the world at the risk of failure. Every one of us has individual chronicles filled with superpowers, trials, tribulations, so we must use our learnings from the past, as well as our current privilege and resources, to create more inclusive opportunities for others and tackle new frontiers. Crises creates an opportunity for people to come together in groups and for individuals and institutions to create change. Over the last several months, our forum group was not only focused on the why of our individual and collective goals or our next moonshot, but also on the how. How, as a country, will we put aside our tribalistic tendencies, which are so ingrained on a humanistic level, but exacerbated today, especially on a political and societal level? One prominent and alienating source that we are surrounded by daily is the global media, where we consume a biased narrative without proper historical context or encouragement that change is possible. The world is much more complex and with so much more creative potential than the nightly news suggests. If we can entrust ourselves to and have faith in each other, instead of selfish and divisive entities, we will create a narrative for enduring transformation. Being in the New Frontier Forum has given me a broader perspective, better understanding, and impactful context of some of the most important and pressing whys and hows in our country and world today. There is no question that we're living in tumultuous times, and possibly from the viewpoint of younger generations, these times are unparalleled. But we must remember that we have in fact witnessed seemingly unimaginable and preposterously impossible things in the past, yet found a way to overcome them. A key lesson from our forum experience is knowing that our history gives us the perspective that people have and will continue a legacy of service and sacrifice to achieve success for the greater good. One of the specific hows that our forum discusses is, how do we want to arrive at this new frontier? Will we be divided by trivial prejudices like one's political preference, the inhumane biases towards race and gender? Or will we be united in unrivaled will and determination focused on humankind? We unanimously chose the latter. We recognize that giving spirit, the ask not spirit of President Kennedy, can lead to monumental breakthroughs from our fears and scarcity defaults. We are the sum of generations, and generations pass. Our experiences that have shaped who we are as individuals, a country, a planet, connect more directly with some of our fellow humans than others, which may only intersect tangentially. I myself am only a few generations removed from West Indian slave immigrants on my father's side and mud hut digging pioneers settling the West on my mother's side. As highlighted by the compelling stories and experiences shared by all of my forum group mates, we must remember that each and every one of us on this planet has a unique and valuable story that is worthy of attention and understanding. It is our job to recognize and reject the social, political, gender, racial, and economic differences that separate us and evangelize the humanity that unites us. Another one of my personal heroes and great American freedom fighters, Frederick Douglass, said it best: "I would unite with anybody to do right and with nobody to do wrong." We must relight the torch of American ingenuity and bravery and address possibilities, once again, utilizing radical collaborations. One of Mick's favorite quotes that he lives by is from Horace Mann: "Be ashamed to die until you've won some victory for humanity." This exact sentiment is shared by our next speaker, Hank Rogers. To them, the members of our forum, and those of you listening right now, believing the impossible risks coming across as delusional thinking. Our fear of failure and false senses of security should never be the excuse to let our biggest problems and challenges remain unaddressed, regardless of how uncomfortable the issues may be. As President Kennedy said, "For courage, not complacency, is needed today." The similar lesson that we can learn from both Mick and Hank is refreshingly simple: solve for one person, one mission, in order to create the catalyst towards scaling that solution and impact exponentially. This is something we are all capable of, regardless of who employs us or who our elected officials are. The new frontier is here, and it is time we once again re-examine President Kennedy's inspiration, pivoting away from costly and inconsequential divisiveness and repositioning our human potential towards the service of others and our planet. We can look at President Kennedy's construction of the Peace Corps as a literal and symbolic call to action for generations to come. Moving away from battle cries of military service, the Peace Corps focuses on inclusive human potential through agriculture, the environment, community economic development, health, education, and youth and development project sectors. Today, we must embody President Kennedy's urgency of confronting a new set of monumental challenges, sprinting towards unification with a spirit of adventure, and turning away from idle promises and public addresses, begetting only more discord and consumption. Whether we strive to effect change on a personal, smaller familial level, or on an interplanetary scale, it is imperative that we dedicate ourselves to the mission and lead vigorously towards accessible solutions. As Hank will show and tell you next, some moonshots are much more literal than others, and creating cultures and networks that embolden creativity, courage, vision, dedication, and an entrepreneurial spirit will be the way we succeed. It is my pleasure to welcome and introduce my fellow New Frontier Forum group mate, Hank Rogers.
So, John F. Kennedy, when he gave that speech, I was 7 years old. We go to the moon not because it's easy, but because it's hard. Those are the words, that got us to the moon in the first place. It led to the Apollo program. And the Apollo program landed 6 times on the moon. That means 12 humans walked on the moon. What an accomplishment. And what happened since then? We haven't been back. Well, it's time. So fast forward, I'm in my early 50s, and I have a life-changing experience. It comes to me in the form of a heart attack. And the heart attack tells me, hey, you know what? You may someday go. It made me vulnerable. And when you go, what is it that's going to upset you if you haven't done anything about it? What are your actual missions in life? What's your bucket list? So I gave that some thought. And of course, climate change is the big one. We have to fix this planet, and that comes first. But the next has to be for us to go to other planets and bring life as we know to other planets. I look at Mother Nature or Gaia, if you will, and I think she is heating up. She's like having hurricanes and fires and so on. I think she's pregnant, and I think we're it. So basically what we need to do is we need to get off this planet And we need to take life as we know it to another planet. Once we do that, and we learn how to live on another planet, like Mars, then Mother Nature will have had a baby. I know that's a big story. So why Mars? Mars is obviously the closest to Earth of any planet in our solar system. There's indications that there used to be surface water, which means that there used to be an atmosphere. And theoretically, with terraforming, we could put all that back. It's a big, long journey, but it's possible. But the journey to Mars is a very long one. Using today's technology, it would take us 8 months to go, 6 months to wait while the Earth comes around, and then another 8 months to come back. That's 22 months. What happens when a small group of people are stuck together in a small space for 22 months? That was what NASA asked us to answer. So we built a 36-foot dome that sleeps 6, 1,200 square foot. And if you go outside, you have to wear a spacesuit. If you communicate with the outside world, it takes 20 minutes each way. Now we did 5 missions, 4 months, 4 months, 8 months, 12 months, and 8 months. And we found out how to do crew selection, and we found out crew psychology. So we learned a lot. But here's the problem. Because it's so far, you have to get it right the first time. So we need to practice. And where's the place that we practice? It's the moon. So we pivoted our efforts to the moon, and we started thinking about the moon. So there will be 3 phases in how to build a moon base. The phase 1 is the simple one. It's the one that we use to build the ISS, the International Space Station. We build a cylinder on Earth, put it inside of a rocket, we put it on the moon, and we have our first piece of our habitat. And we do that 4 or 5 times, and now we have a little community, if you will, with rooms. But soon we'll find out that we won't have enough space inside of those cylinders. We need bigger space because we need to do bigger things. And so phase 2 will be where we build larger structures using parts that are prefabricated, then brought to the moon, and then assembled by robots on the moon. That's phase 2. Phase 3 is once we have enough infrastructure on the moon, we can start using the material of the moon to, it's called in situ resource utilization, to actually build things using the material of the moon. I have an organization called PICES, the Pacific International Space Center for Exploration Systems, and we again work with NASA to make lunar concrete. And the lunar concrete is made out of Hawaii volcanic dust, which is 96% the same as lunar dust or regolith. And all we did was add heat, and the heat turned it into concrete. This will enable us to build underground structures, large underground structures. Now, SpaceX, they have had their recent great successes. And I talked to the top people in SpaceX, and they told me they could land me 150 metric tons on the moon by 2024. And the question is, what are we sending to the moon? And the answer is phase 2 moon parts. We are going to build a moon base on the moon using robots, large structures, and then we're going to send people to live in them. So I'm going to leave you with a little animated video of the moon base being built. At first you'll see some cylinders being deployed, and then you'll see a dome being built. And the robots are going to be putting the triangles into place. And at first, the floor layer will be added, and next we will have the ground floor wall, and little by little the dome will take shape until it's complete. And once it's completed, the robots can get started and build a second dome and a third dome, because we've worked out how to build many of them by this time. I'm hoping that you will support this effort. This is the ultimate dream of John F. Kennedy, is to have a permanent human presence on the moon. And this is the future of mankind, humankind. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hank, for your inspiring words. And thank you to the New Frontier Summit, to James Jenkins, and to the John F. Kennedy Library Foundation team. I'm Kim Kupinis from B-Lab, and as a proud alumna of the John F. Kennedy School of Government at Harvard, I have special love for President Kennedy's legacy and the Kennedy Library from my time in Massachusetts. And it's because of President Kennedy's moonshot vision and his legacy that my 10-year-old son wants to be an astronaut and one of the first humans on Mars. So thank you, Hank, for all that you're doing to help us get there. It is my absolute honor and privilege to join you and to introduce you to two extraordinary leaders for our time, Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson and Dr. Katharine Wilkinson. We'll have a chance to hear from each of them in a few minutes, but to give you a glimpse of the heroines that you're about to hear from, Elle named Dr. Johnson one of the 27 women leading the charge to protect our environment, and Outside Magazine called her the most influential marine biologist of our time. And in 2019, Time Magazine named Dr. Wilkinson one of 15 women who will save the world. Over the next 30 minutes, we'll hear from these inspiring transformers about their newly released book, All We Can Save: Truth, Courage, and Solutions for the Climate Crisis. It is a powerful anthology of essays, art, and poetry that illuminates the expertise and insights of dozens of diverse women leading on climate in the United States: scientists, journalists, farmers, lawyers, teachers, activists, innovators, policy wonks, and designers across generations, geographies, and race. And it aims to advance a more representative, nuanced, and solution-oriented public conversation on the climate crisis. 2020 has been a year, my friends. We're confronted with a global pandemic, deep-seated racial injustice, a serious downturn in the global economy, and we are living in real time with the devastating impacts of climate change. I live with my family in the Rocky Mountain West, and we have had devastating wildfires this season, but nothing like those that are destroying parts of California, Oregon, and Washington. And what is happening in the American West is just the tip of the proverbial global iceberg. Many things have become clear over the last 6 months, including the fact that on this miraculous blue planet that we call home, we all breathe the same air. We are truly interdependent. The climate, biodiversity, and health crises are borderless. They make it clear that we have pushed our biosphere and our society way beyond our planetary and social boundaries. Without swift and immediate action at an unprecedented pace and scale, we will miss the window of opportunity to create the equitable, just, and regenerative future that our children deserve. Science and our lived reality are showing us that climate change will become a catastrophe that will dwarf the impact of the coronavirus pandemic. We need transformative leadership at every level of society. And as the authors point out so beautifully in the book, we are as a species and a civilization, we need healing for ourselves and for our planet. From my vantage point from within the business realm, business is uniquely culpable for the climate crisis, and therefore we are uniquely responsible, in my view, for fixing it. The B Corp movement that I'm proud to be a part of is working hard to equip businesses to do their part, from providing pathways to reinventing the very fabric of how capitalism works, to the nitty-gritty of how businesses must painstakingly decarbonize their models in the months and years ahead, and to the ways that businesses can show up with collective voice and action to solve this existential threat. As a climate warrior myself, as a mother, a sister, a daughter, and as a woman, everything about this book has resonated with me. Our news feeds are bloated with doom and gloom and disaster. Amidst the pandemic, amidst racial injustice, biodiversity loss, gross human inequities, and the climate emergency, how can we not feel despair? And yet, I would say that this book could not have come to us like the soothing and healing balm that it is at a better or more important time. Nor could there be a more appropriate book to elucidate the themes of the New Frontiers Summit: systemic reckoning, collaborative leadership, scaling trust, and courage and commitment for solutions. Rolling Stone wrote of All We Can Save that it will make you feel hopeful about the climate crisis because it spotlights women climate leaders who are offering solutions, encouragement, and an invitation to join the movement. And I've been reading the book since it arrived at my house on Tuesday, and about every paragraph. I want to say, like, I want to stop and yell out loud, yes. I just want to read one snippet from this amazing book to give you a flavor of the power of voice and the clarity of understanding that both Ayanna and Catherine have gifted to us all. The same patriarchal power structure that has oppressed and exploits girls, women, and non-binary people, and constricts and contorts boys and men, also wreaks destruction on the natural world. Dominance, supremacy, violence, extraction, egotism, greed, ruthless competition, these hallmarks of patriarchy fuel the climate crisis just as surely as they do in inequality, colluding with racism all along the way. Patriarchy silences, breeds contempt, fuels destructive capitalism, and plays a zero-sum game. Its harms are chronic, cumulative, and fundamentally planetary. That's some powerful stuff, my friends. I'm so grateful for the work that you have put together here, and I'm sharing it widely, I'll tell you. So welcome to our guests. Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson is a marine biologist, a policy expert, writer, and Brooklyn native. She is the founder and CEO of Ocean Collective, a consulting firm for conservation solutions grounded in social justice, and a founder of Urban Ocean Lab, a think tank for the future of coastal cities. And Dr. Catherine Wilkinson, my friend, is an author, strategist, teacher, and homegrown Atlanta native, named one of the 15 women who will save the world by Time. Her writings include the Drawdown Review, the New York Times bestseller Drawdown, and Between God and Green. Ayanna and Catherine, welcome.
Thanks for having us.
Hi, Kim. Hi. Thank you both. And thank you for helping us remember that we are creatures of possibility, that we are about goodness and optimism. Thank you. This book is really extraordinary. So I want to leap right into the book. Yes,
great job. I also happen to have a copy.
Sure, one or two in your garage, I'm guessing. So I want to just leap right into the book. Tell us about the title, All We Can Save, and the beautiful Adrienne Rich quote that you shared in the opening of the book. And I'm going to read that quote and then hand it over to you. My heart is moved by all I cannot save. So much has been destroyed. I have to cast my lot with those who age after age, perversely, with no extraordinary power, reconstitute the world. There's so much in that. So could you unpack that a little bit and share why both of you thought this book and its ideas were so important to give to the world right now?
Thanks for leading with the presumption that this book is an important gift to the world. We'll take it. I think this book represents something that Catherine and I have seen as missing from the public discourse on what do we do with the fact that we are in a climate crisis, right? Not describing it, not sort of bemoaning it, but saying like, what does this mean for us as humanity, and what does the way forward look like? And offering, these 41 essays as 41 different answers to that question, as 41 different ways to contribute to solutions. And so that epigraph that you read is from a poem by Adrienne Rich called Natural Resources. It's just one stanza. And it opens with, as you read, my heart is moved by all I cannot save. And that we wanted to flip it on its head and say, ours too, but also by all that we still can. And that is the inspiration for the title of the book is, the acknowledgement that the world has fundamentally changed because of the emission of greenhouse gases and all sorts of other pollution and horrible things that have been done to the planet, but that we still get to write the future. And so that is sort of the energy we wanted to bring to this book, and what we feel is so needed in the public discourse. All of these voices that have extremely good answers to that question of where do we go from here, that we thought the world needed to hear, because, to date, we've been sort of had this public conversation on climate dominated by a fairly small group of white men who, sort of like brilliant and well-meaning as they are, will never represent the full spectrum of sort of like intellectual might and ingenuity that will sort of get us there. So how can we foster this whole new wave of leaders to help direct us?
Love it. Yep, and Catherine.
Well, Ayana covered that really beautifully. You know, I think the we and all we can save is really important. Not just that it is a big and mighty we, which we definitely need. But I think it invites us to think about how we come to this work, right? How we approach it in ways that welcome other people in, that keep one another feeling good and staying in the work. And we know, right, science, nearly 2 years ago now, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change put it in very plain language that we need unprecedented change in every aspect of the global economy. So if the task at hand is to radically and rapidly transform society to cut emissions in half this decade and move rapidly to a zero emissions future, well, we also need to then be transformational leaders. And I hope that's one of the things that people kind of come to a new understanding of in the pages of this book, of what transformational climate leadership can look like. And it turns out that kind of leadership is both more characteristically feminine and more faithfully feminist. And the good news is that is not just the domain of women, although women are bringing it in droves to the climate space, but that is really a kind of leadership that is open to people of any gender. And so we hope that while the focus in this book is on women, that the lessons of it are extraordinarily broad and encompassing.
Yep, I love it. I want to tap into something you were talking about, Catherine, and pull out something from the Rolling Stone review. Awesome review of the book, by the way. It says this book is a feast of ideas and perspectives, setting a big table for the climate movement, declaring all are welcome. And that is a comforting and much needed sentiment, particularly in a time when isolation and polarization feel like the dominant cultural modes of the day. A moment when we have so many of the solutions to the climate crisis in hand and just need people to come together to actually make them happen. And I'd say from that quote, like it really is an all hands on deck kind of moment in history. Yeah. And yet I find in my work, and I'm sure that this is kind of coming through in the stories, that figuring out how to do that radical collaboration is kind of the sticky wicket, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd like to hear both of you talk about how do you knock down those barriers, the barriers that have been a big part of getting in the way of us solving all kinds of challenges, but now we have a planetary challenge that needs radical collaboration.
Well, first, I love a cricket analogy, so thank you for that. And I'll just, your microphone is rubbing against your jacket and causing a bunch of stuff.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate you telling me. Thank you.
So I think it's what Catherine was describing, this like a more stereotypically feminine qualities of nurturing and healing and collaboration and shine theory and sort of like, you know, making progress instead of like being right, and the collective over this sort of like individual hero, right? I mean, this is a book by a chorus, and I think the back cover, which is impossible to read, but you'll get the picture, just lists the name of every single contributor, the 41 essayists, the 17 poets, our illustrator, who's also in our mind a poet, because that's what we need, right? We need people from all over the country with all sorts of different areas of expertise, all genders, all sort of approaches to leadership, and races and ages. I mean, this is a book that spans like teenagers to grandmas, who each have something incredibly insightful to add. So when we think of how to build the biggest and most successful movement the world has ever seen, which is what's required, we think about like, how I love that Rolling Stone uses that analogy of like, how do we set the table with places for everyone? And we do. It just felt amazing to read that review, because that is what we were trying to do.
Yeah, and to pick up on something you said, Ayanna, I also love the fact that the audiobook has an even more diverse set of voices who are speaking the words of the stories and the contributions in the book. And you clearly have such a deep grasp of what stories and voice in this moment to kind of paint the full picture of humanity and why that is so needed right now to solve this crisis. I'd love to turn to
on the audiobook, in case people are like sick of reading books. I just started listening to it last night. It is so good. It's Julia Louis-Dreyfus and Janet Mock and Alana Glazer and Sophia Bush and Alfre Woodard and Jane Fonda.
I think I want your Rolodexes.
I called in a lot of favors. I'll just say I'm like out of favors. But to see like these women immediately get the project and like want to be a part of it and want to lend their talents is exactly what the climate movement needs. Like, everyone bring your talents and figure out where they plug in. And, you know, Catherine and I have read every word in this book at minimum 10 times, but to hear these words read by these like powerful, rich, multi-layered voices, I was just like, knocked my socks off.
I love it. I can't wait
during dinner and just like listen.
I've been reading it, but I'm going to get the audiobook tonight. I love it. In the book, it's interesting. There have been many female climate warriors over the decades, you know, Rachel Carson among them. But in the book, you start the book by talking about Eunice Newton Foote, who I hadn't heard of, as the first climate feminist. She was the person who discovered that carbon dioxide would lead to planetary warming back in 1856. And she was also a signatory to the Seneca Falls Declaration on Women's Rights. You say she's a climate feminist, and that sounds like me. I'm sure it sounds like both of you. So can you share a little bit about what you mean by that moniker, what, you know, and how can we all be climate feminists?
Yeah. We love Eunice so much. We feel like we're on a first name basis with her at this point. And we're really delighted that this book may help address to some small degree the not knowing about Eunice, who really should be a household name. And yeah, I mean, I think it's extraordinarily cool that the first woman to do, at least to publish, climate science was also a committed feminist. She was committed to a gender equal future. And delightfully, it turns out that her husband was as well, because he also signed the Seneca Falls Declaration. So it's, you know, what we love is that those two things have been hand in hand since the very beginning of women's leadership on this topic, from 1856 to today. And I think, you know, to me, what climate feminism means is understanding that the climate crisis and gender equality are utterly and inextricably linked with one another. So the sources of the climate crisis are gendered in nature, right? Kind of extractive capitalism, patriarchy, white supremacy colluding, as you read, Kim, you know, to create this system that, among other harms, generates greenhouse gases that, in the words of Dr. Kate Marvel, lard the atmosphere. That when we think about the impacts of the climate crisis, those have disproportionate impacts on women and girls, especially when we're thinking about the global South, rural communities, indigenous communities, communities of color. And then also, and what we really kind of lean into in this book, of course, is that the solutions that we need to this crisis need to be at least gender equal in their sources. And we know still that there is an enormous gap from UN negotiations to the media to national legislatures to the fields of law, engineering, business, across the board, right? All of these decision-making tables where climate impacting decisions are being made, women are not represented equally. And of course, that is then dramatically less equal for women who are not white. And that's just not going to work because, as Ayanna said so well at the beginning, we just have to be practical about this, right? We need the very best thinking from all corners of humanity coming together. We need that kaleidoscope, right? A single lens is just not going to work. And I think just the other piece of that is that there's kind of a growing body of evidence that outcomes are better. So this isn't just sort of, it sounds nice, right? It like sounds like a good theory of change. We actually do have research that shows that in countries where there is greater gender equality, carbon emissions are lower. That when legislatures are more gender equal or have more women than men, there's greater adoption of environmental treaties and environmental laws are stricter, and right, like we actually see this play out. So it's more than just, it seems nice. Yeah, jump in, Ayanna.
Yeah. I was just saying it's quantifiable, which is something that I hadn't known until we started writing the opening essay of the book together. Was just like that it's not some like wishful thinking that if we like, wouldn't it be great if women were in charge? It's like, no, literally it would be better.
Totally. Yep. You know, the other thing that I really,
like women don't have to run everything, right?
Right.
And I think that's the one we're in. It's like, we really need everyone. So like, why would we leave out half the brain power of the planet? Like,
yeah, totally. It's,
And-
I'm
and-
sure like you both, I read a lot of climate stuff and it feels like we get just the facts, ma'am. It's like, here's the problem, here's the solution. It's, you know, and what I love about this book is that you've made room for your contributors to really embrace the grief, the horror, the scope and scale and how it impacts human hearts. And, you know, that's like a different narrative. That's a wholly different approach to how we talk about climate crisis and tackling. And would you kind of address, I know you've really made a clear case for why women need to be not only at the table, like need to be a major part of the solution to this, but what is the role of the feminine aspects of society, not just people, but like all of the ways that we think about the feminine narrative?
Yeah.
Catherine, do you want to talk about the feel section?
Yeah, definitely. So there are 8 main sections of the book, and one of them is called Feel, and it is very explicitly engaging with all the things, right? There are inescapably psychological and spiritual dimensions to the climate crisis, and we really believe that that we ignore those things at our peril, right? Because they're there, whether we want to address them and talk about them or not, they are definitely there. And they can either be part of what helps us arrive at deeper knowledge, deeper truth, and fuels action, or they can be things that keep us on the sidelines. And I think to your point, Kim, like when it's like just the science and here are some charts and look at the wind turbines, like that, you know, like
I do
great.
like a good wind turbine.
I do love a good wind turbine. But yeah, it's like, I think we can railroad over the things that are coming up for people, which like, you know, this is an existential crisis. We're asking existential questions. We've got big feelings about it. So let's like make space for that. And to your point, Kim, I think that your earlier question, I think that actually helps us create a more welcoming and inviting space, because I think for a long time, the climate movement has acted as if like people don't know, and so they don't care. So we are just going to, this was a weird term that came out of my mouth in another interview. We're going to fact you up. Like we're just going to like smack facts all over you, and then you will wake up and you will care and you will do all
planetary mansplaining.
Planetary mansplaining, right? And I think like we forget that actually sometimes it's not that people don't care, but that caring and not knowing who to care with and what to do with that care is just too hard. And so people hang on the sidelines. So there are amazing pieces in that section by Ash Sanders, Amy Westervelt, Mary Hegler, Susie Moser. Who am I missing, Ayana? Emily Johnston, and some beautiful poetry. And I think sums up so well, there's a quote from Audre Lorde that our feelings are our most genuine paths to knowledge. So again, it's not just about like, feeling is nice, right? But that like feeling is really important because we don't just know with our heads, we know with our hearts too.
Yeah, I was, as I was listening to the audiobook last night, I mean, obviously the feeling comes through much more when you hear it read. And I was listening to Alana Glazer read Kate Marvel's essay about geoengineering. And then I texted her and I was like, this is so good. And she was like, you know, the essay that you just mentioned, Catherine, Ash Sanders wrote an essay called Under the Weather about sort of the anxiety and grief and sort of like, what do we even do with a challenge this big? And Alana was like, reading that essay changed me. And she already got it, right? Like she was already like, we should do something about it. But like being given sort of the words or the commiseration or the framing to sort of let you like move past the feelings to the what next. Mm-hmm. We write in our begin essay, like, can't skip this part as like one of the ways we describe the feel sections. I know we all want to skip it and go ahead to the solutions and just like focus on decarbonizing the grid. And believe me, we need to do that. But we also need to just like make sure that we emerge whole and together. And so to your point, Kim, about like the power of the feminine in this moment is to harness this collectivism. Mm-hmm. And instead of saying like, we're each gonna do our own thing and somehow that will like magically all add up to the right outcome. Yeah. It's just not gonna work. Like we need to figure out how to do things in a collaborative and complementary way that really makes sure that the future is crafted in such a fashion that there's a place for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I have so much I want to ask you about. We have only 10 minutes, actually more like 8 now. Go for it, Catherine.
I was just going to say, and when like, you know, the feminine, right, like can feel like this sort of fuzzy kind of concept. And I think it's just helpful to think about the feminine as like life force, right? It's like the thing that is life-giving, that persists despite all odds. And that like, yeah, we could use that for sure, right now.
You know, I kind of want to get to how we get to work and amplify these stories and this wisdom. I was trolling through both of your social media posts last night just to kind of get a sense of where your heart is on the release of the book. And Ayana, I saw some really powerful quotes from you about Black Lives Matter. And you've asked what might the way look like to go forward when Black Lives Matter. And we have climate justice and racial justice. And I'd love to hear you talk about what does that way forward look like?
Yeah. I've been thinking about that a lot this week, especially, you know, given the developments in Breonna Taylor's case and the sort of horrifying lack of justice there. And I also, I co-host a podcast called How to Save the Planet, which is about climate change. And we have been working on this episode for weeks about what the climate movement can learn from the Black Lives Matter movement. Mm-hmm. And one of the two people we interviewed for that episode is Colette Pichon Battle, who has this stunningly beautiful essay in the collection that was adapted from a TED Talk she gave. So if people can't wait to get their hands on the book, you can listen to her TED Talk right now and get like a good bit of the same material. And just, you know, the way that she frames these issues is that, you know, the way that the movement for Black Lives is organized, it is like when that movement first emerged in Ferguson, it was like deliberately looking at past social movements and saying, what do we need to do better? And number one was like this single charismatic leader thing, that does not work out. We need a leaderful movement. We need enough leaders that everyone can tell their own story, that we have this distributed network of, you know, chapters and individuals across the country and the world. And the way he described it, this guy Maurice, who was one of the people who was there in that sort of like incepting moment, he said, we need a social movement that is more like an ecosystem. And that just totally struck me as, you know, exactly what Catherine and I are trying to bring to the climate work. And what Colette says is we also need people who are accountable to the place we're from, right? A lot of the climate and environmental movement has been like, you know, very privileged people, almost always white, going to other places and telling them what to do. Or like, we have the solution, we have this technical solution. And instead, she's like, you need to be accountable to your communities. You need to go fix your home. We all need to like fix our homes and the places where we're from. And we need to be much more creative about it. And sort of like, no matter what you think of this movement, this like sort of slogan to defund the police, it has opened up a whole new conversation about what policing should look like and what is possible. And so she sort of like brings this question to mind of like, what would it look like if we thought that big about how we would transform systems as relates to climate?
This makes me think a lot about the Margaret Wheatley and Deborah Freeze article about how social change really happens and the notion of emergence and how it has to start at home with communities of trust. And this is on a scale and a scope that we've never seen before, but that's exactly what you just described, Diana, is right on in terms of how this has to happen, or we won't get where we know we need to go. Mm-hmm. We need to move in the direction of like wrapping, but I would love to have you each share, well, so the book includes a lot of calls to action. Each of your contributors has their own unique call to action. And each of them has a unique angle on solving this true crisis of our time. I would love to hear from you, not only what the most poignant calls to action are from your contributors, but maybe 3 things each of you would say we must do to care for the future of our species, you know, to solve this. Share with our audience today, what are your 3 things that they must do that comes out of the wisdom of the book?
Maybe, Ayana, maybe we can go back and forth.
Ooh, cool. I'm in.
That seems kind of fun. So one that's coming to mind for me today is Leah Stokes' essay, which moves from, it's kind of her own journey as a climate activist, a researcher, professor, public intellectual, from kind of the individual scale of actions, straws, bikes, you know, all of that good stuff, to rippling out to the collective action that we know is needed. There is no way for us to reduce ourselves into a clean energy grid, for example. We have got to link arms for systemic change. So I would say that would be the first thing. In what ways are you plugging into some kind of collective change? Local campaigns, elections, you know, any of those things, super important.
Yeah. which reminds me of Kate Knuth's essay on becoming a climate citizen. I mean, Catherine and I raced to get this book out before the election in hopes that it would spark some conversations about what kinds of climate policy we need in the US, and the role we can each play in holding our elected representatives accountable. So I would just like to offer up that term. Like, what does it mean to be a climate citizen? What does it mean to be a voter who prioritizes climate? And in this election, at the presidential level, that could not be a more stark choice. And there are 3 or 4 women in this book who have helped to shape, dramatically improve Joe Biden's climate plan. And so it's interesting to also be able to see a little bit behind the curtain of how policy has evolved in the US in the last few years.
Yeah.
I love it. And I know you both have launched the All We Can Save project. Can you give me a one-liner version of what that is and how people can get involved?
Yeah,
definitely. This book wanted to be more than a book. And we know that there's a lot more work to do to support women's climate leadership. So that is what the All We Can Save project is designed for. We're going to do work around education, around community building, and then around direct financial support that is not a pittance, is not symbolic, is actually real funds to do really important.
Like
I love it.
Climate Genius Board does not sound like a good idea.
I love
it. There's more detail about the project and also about All We Can Save circles. So kind of deep dialogue reading circles that will kick off the week of October 5th, all on our website, which is allwecansave.earth. Which
love it.
Is pretty easy to remember. What are we saving? Oh, right, .earth.
The planet. So friends, given the scope and scale of this climate crisis, it would be easy to stick our proverbial heads in the sand as a collective and as individuals, but we have to summon the truth, the courage, the solutions to turn away from the brink and towards the life-giving and the life-sustaining future we all know is possible. And All We Can Save can help us do that. So buy a copy of this beautiful, inspiring,
your climate denier,
life-changing book.
And your activist team.
Yes, buy it for all your friends, buy it for community groups, for your company, for your organization. Give to the All We Can Save project, join one of the book groups. Ayanna and Catherine, as Caroline Kennedy and Jack Schlossberg said, and others shared in the remarks to mark the 60th anniversary of JFK's New Frontier speech, the only valid test of leadership is to lead and to lead vigorously. Thank you both for leading vigorously.
Oh, thank you, Kim.
Thanks, Kim.
My name is Maggie Hayden Bramley, and I'm the director of the New Frontier Network. Thank you very much for participating in today's New Frontier Summit. The breakout sessions will begin at 3:15 and will conclude at 4. Please use the chat in the box to join. Again, on behalf of the JFK Library Foundation, thank you and be well.